Welcome to episode 55, Construction Nation, and the last of our best of 2019 episodes. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team. So for this month, we have been listening to the best of 2019. So many great episodes, so many guests. And these were just highlights of some of the wonderful episodes we've had. So far we have listened to episode number 5, number 4, number 3, and last week, number 2. And here today is number 1, the top episode for 2019. And this is based on the total number of downloads and the total number of downloads the month that it appeared, as well as the most comments received. Drum roll, here we go. Number 1 in our construction countdown is episode number 11. Ta-da! With Steve Jones, the director of MHC Research and Analytics at Dodge Data and Analytics. Steve's episode is filled with insights he's gained from his years in the industry and the research he's been involved with. He has such a unique perspective. In this episode, Steve shares what he sees as the strategic trends in the industry. You know, as we end 2019, what a fantastic episode to end with as we listen to this and think about what you or your company can do to use these trends to improve your projects and maybe even your competitive advantage in 2020. So enjoy. Here is Steve Jones and episode number 11. Welcome to episode 11, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host for Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn how to build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. The shortest way to success is to learn from others who have been there and done that. If you want to receive Construction Dream Team on your phone automatically every week, please head on over to constructiondreamteam.com, iTunes, or Stitcher and subscribe. We'd love to get a 5-star rating. This will get us more visibility in the search engines, making us more visible to more of Construction Nation. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to Steve Jones. He is the Senior Director of Industry Insights Research at Dodge Data and Analytics, where Steve focuses on emerging economic practice and technology trends that are transforming the global design and construction industry. He has given hundreds of speeches and writes many articles for industry publications. Steve produces the Dodge Data and Analytics Smart Market Reports, and I'm sure many of Construction Nation read this regularly. I know I do. Steve's an expert in construction trends. I believe the future of construction and how teams will work together is being created today. I think Steve has a very unique vantage point to share how he sees the future being created today. So welcome, Steve, to Construction Dream Team.
Thank you, Sue.
So tell us a little bit about how you came to be the Senior Director of Industry Insights and Research at Dodge Data and Analytics.
My zigzag path. Well, I started in design in the mid-'70s. By the mid-'80s, I was vice president of a firm here in Philadelphia, about 100 people. And I decided to get an MBA, and I applied to the executive program at Wharton. I think I was, frankly, a diversity choice for them because, not really in my race or my gender or anything, but I'm sure they were not seeing very many applications coming from design. That's not a field exactly known for what you think of as business acumen. Anyway, I got in. It was an executive MBA program, so everybody was working the whole time. And that was part of what made it really interesting and valuable. It wasn't theories. It was all really hard-nosed, practical stuff. It ended up really changing how I dealt with both prospects and clients. Most firms, they look at what they do and what they come to talk to a client about is design projects. And they would start by pitching a client with a list of things they'd done and pictures and their beautiful work. I would go in, I just roll up my sleeves and sit down and start talking about their business. They really didn't have a design project as far as I was concerned. It was an investment, right? Because they're spending serious money to do something. So I would ask them questions. What's this investment mean to you? How is it going to impact your business? What concerns do you have about it? What does success look like to you on this? Really different than most of my competitors are doing. And it would position us as a knowledgeable advisor, not just somebody who's looking to have another design project. Because everybody can do that. The problem is that these guys couldn't really differentiate between designers coming in and showing them a lot of beautiful photographs. So I would talk about design as an exercise of constrained optimization.
That's very interesting. And it gave you a competitive advantage, but it also differentiated you. 2 for 1.
It did. And it also helped them understand what design is, right? It made them better clients. And so typically that's how I would start using examples from other projects, right? And they'd get hooked. So it was really a context for design that they were more comfortable with. And, I try and bring that forward in the research that we do. And so I was having a fair amount of success with that and jump forward to the end of the millennium in 1999. I was a principal at that time for a big AE firm. I was running one of their 6 offices, and one of my buddies from Wharton called. And he said he'd just been hired by this big software company called Primavera. And, they do all the scheduling on all the biggest projects in the world. He said, they've asked me to come in and do a whole web strategy for them. I know all about the technology. I know nothing about construction. So I've told them about you. And would you be interested in coming in and meeting them? And I said, well, where are they? I thought they were in Silicon Valley or something. Turned out their headquarters at Primavera is 8 minutes from my house. So it was awesome. And it was the end of the millennium, just a perfect time to make a big change. It was also in the middle of that crazy .com boom. So basically anybody who cast a shadow and gave off heat could get millions of dollars. And they're all running around making PowerPoint presentations about disruptive disintermediation and everything. But they didn't have any code. They didn't have any customers. Meanwhile, here's Primavera. They had the biggest customers in the industry. Every major contractor was working for them. And they had actual real grown-up software developers and knew how to do quality control. And they had a sales channel, all this amazing stuff that none of these startups had. So I thought, this looks like a pretty good bet. And, I went there. We actually launched the first cloud collaboration platform for construction back in 2001. Any of your listeners who are techies, what we did was an ASP version of a document management software at the time called OpenText. And we made it construction specific. We got Intel using it globally. We got J&J using it. We got NAVFAC using it. For me personally, it was an amazing experience because when you work in a market like I was doing in Philadelphia, I knew that market pretty well and I knew what was going on in it. But you go to work for Primavera, that completely stretches your awareness and it really makes you understand that we are part of this thing called the global construction industry because there isn't a major project anywhere that isn't using Primavera. So it became really great prep from my perspective for this current role I have for doing research all over the world. Clearly, as everybody knows, things slowed down a lot in that tech sector after the .com bubble burst. And I was speaking at a conference and I ran into an old friend from Philadelphia, another recovering architect. And he asked me to join the company he was running at the time, McGraw-Hill Construction. They owned ENR, they owned Architectural Record, they owned Suites, they owned Dodge. And he was personally committed to using information to connect people, products, projects. And so he wanted me to come on board and focus on what emerging areas they should concentrate on, what partners they should work with, what kind of new information products we could do to really help connect. Really, the sky was the limit. And that was enormous fun. And out of that came this focus on what I think of as voice of the industry research. Because the industry is so fragmented and it's so project focused. It's difficult for anybody to see beyond a handful of projects, and nobody was really tracking on an industry-wide scale. What are people actually doing that is reliably generating tangible, repeatable, scalable kinds of benefits? Everybody wanted to get better, but everybody's operating in kind of a vacuum. So for the last 15 years now, we've been getting the quantified data on what's going on with green, what's going on with BIM, what's going on with safety, what's going on with managing risk, what's going on with lean, what's going on with project delivery methods, what kind of metrics are people using for team and project performance. And we've also been getting into some more complex and nuanced stuff, like how do you manage uncertainty and unrealistic performance expectations? And how are integrated digital workflows and more connected teams helping out? So really, I mean, my life is so interesting every day. And what's fun is I get a chance to share all this with the whole world.
It sounds remarkable. I love the idea of the voice of the industry focus, because I think you're exactly right. We are so fragmented as an industry. It's very hard to get your handle around anything, any aspect. I mean, we're segmented and we have different markets. It's just everywhere. It's so large and so complex that it's hard to understand. So I salute you for this effort.
The bits and pieces that people do see end up just being anecdotal, and they can completely conflict with one another. And so what do? How do you move forward? And what we try and do is say, look, we talk to all your peers out there. If you're going to do something, these are the 3 things people say are moving the needle. Go do those 3 things and then come back and do the next 3 things. We really try and help people cut through the noise and get some kind of path forward.
That's remarkable. So I love to hear people's story, because that helps other people that are listening understand, it's never a straight path. It's always a winding road. But it leads you someplace that you wouldn't have imagined, perhaps. So let's jump into thinking about strategic trends. So you have this vantage point. Share with us, what are the strategic trends you see in the industry now?
I think when you look at that, I look at it in 2 big categories, which of course connect with each other, but are worthy of looking at separately. One are the projects themselves, and then the other is all the people in the process component of getting those projects done. And I think if I was going to say the real key strategic trends that are going on is that this industry, which is so fragmented, is really rapidly transforming towards, there's no better term for it than industrialization. And job sites, I think we're going to be seeing them become more about assembly of really well designed and well executed components that are built elsewhere, brought together, and less about construction. That means we're going to be seeing a lot more modularization, a lot more prefabrication. We're also going to be seeing a lot more ability to use, and the perhaps overused phrase of big data, but still there's a lot of interesting information that people are gleaning about their projects, right? But to be able to now take that and apply things like artificial intelligence and machine learning to bring much more automated decision making into our world, rather than saying, well, if this person's been doing this for 30 years, they probably know what they're supposed to do. The problem is that's why we don't necessarily really move forward, because that person who's been doing it for 30 years has no incentive to do anything other than the same thing that they've been doing for 30 years. Right. So we tend to repeat a lot of the same mistakes. But I think that there's going to be big business opportunities in this. And you're seeing a lot of the product manufacturers, you're seeing a lot of the software companies sort of moving into how is it that we can help people make better decisions. And, frankly, all this is doing is really catching up with every one of the big capital industries out there, automotive, shipbuilding, aerospace. It's been years since Boeing built an actual physical prototype of an airplane. They don't have to do it, right? They virtually test everything. They virtually design it. Their suppliers are all tied in really tightly with them, and they're focused on what's called interface control documentation, right? Between the pieces that come to them, and they assemble these things. And lo and behold, they fly, they float, they do real well. I mean, can you imagine yourself the next time you want to get a car, the first thing you had to do was find a bunch of design firms and interview them and pick one to design your car? and then you'd have to bid that out. And then you got a whole bunch of people showing up in your driveway who probably don't even know each other, and they're going to start building it. I mean, hey, what could go wrong? So what's your level of expectation of perfection on something like that? That's how we're doing these buildings.
I'm seeing this already happening on projects I'm working on, where we just talked about it a couple of days ago on a project that last year we were able to do remarkable things by building a good amount of the work offsite, especially MEP and some of the system stuff. And the virtual design and construction, what's happening with that is amazing, where after a pour happens, it's in the model and little red shows up and you can see where maybe a pipe isn't stubbed out quite right. Or, I mean, it's pretty amazing what's already happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of good use of tools. People are using laser scanning now to go in, say, on a hospital floor. I did a lot of healthcare work. You might have 150 different penetrations for various drain lines and med gases and all the stuff that have to run vertically. Wouldn't it be nice to know before you pour the concrete on the metal deck that they were all in the right place? Because unfortunately, the deck's going to go in, the partitions are going to go up, the ceilings are going to go in, the vinyl's going to go on, the handrails are going to go in, the floor is going to go on, the base is going to go in, and then the last guy comes into the room to hang the sink. He goes, hey, this thing's 12 inches off. That's like 11 change orders right there that go in. And the technology is there to do those kinds of things. But I think also that our building product manufacturing industry, and we have a lot of building product manufacturers as our customers, kind of stopped at a certain level, right? You can get a door set with a frame, but I think what we're going to see now, as you begin to see with bathroom pods, people are doing this in hotels and things, you're going to see more of the ability to specify, design with, and then buy larger and larger smart chunks of buildings and do much more assembly on the site now, rather than dumping a bunch of raw materials there, having a bunch of people cut them up and put them in place and fight each other for scaffolds and dumpsters and all the other crazy stuff that goes on.
Kind of reminds me of I met the woman years ago that was the head at the time of Bank of America. And she saw in the grocery stores, Wells Fargo had built out little stores, and the banking in the grocery store had emerged. And I was a member of a group called Building Futures Council, and she'd come to us saying, we need help. We're trying to figure out how we can build these stores so that we can compete with Wells Fargo, but we need to be able to build these in 6 weeks or we've already lost the race. And she said she went all over the world trying to figure out how they could get these built in 6 weeks. And then one day she goes to a conference and she sees how they build these facilities really quickly and take them down for these conferences. So she went to a conference manufacturer and they were able to build it in 6 hours.
There are companies now like Adidas and Project Frog that are in the business of doing that with full buildings. Autodesk just put some money into Project Frog, but they got architects to help them design a really good kit of parts, not junky looking trailer stuff. Really high quality buildings that you'd be very proud to have in your portfolio, but they can be essentially configured to be this. You can make a data center, you can make an educational building, you can make a healthcare facility out of them. And Kaiser was facing that same problem, of course, of getting clinics put up places, because that's now what feeds the bigger hospitals, is getting neighborhood clinics. They were typically running 21 months to get a 9,000 square foot building. Project Frog could do it in half of that, and it's LEED silver. So whose phone rings now and whose phone doesn't ring? I always look at the business impact of these things. It's not as if a client's going to tell you should do it. They're simply going to call somebody else and your phone's just not going to be ringing anymore.
That's true. And it's very exciting.
Yeah. And you're producing great stuff.
Looking at the pipe arrays that are done off and manufactured off site and then brought in, they are so spectacularly clean. And then a crane just lifts it into place, and very few workers are actually on site.
And it's safer to produce that, and there's much less waste of materials. Those are two things that come out, because we study this. We've been studying that trend for 11 years now, especially around mechanical and structural.
What do you see as the impact on people from around these trends? So we're about the people side. So what do you see as kind of paint us a picture of what's going to happen with the people in construction.
I think there's obviously got to be way more focus, and we've been tracking this increasingly, but there's more room to go on these ideas of integration and collaboration. Something as simple as pulling a team together and taking a fresh look at who should do something, right? Who ought to do it instead of who has always been doing it for 30 years. That can make such a difference. And then suddenly I got your back, and suddenly you understand what I do. I understand what you do. We're in this together, as opposed to the typically adversarial relationship that you get between trade contractors, general contractors. And it's getting the knowledge that you have around that table to think about, how do we make the whole process better, instead of each player essentially safeguarding their process potentially at the expense of everybody else. And something that I always want to try and make any audience I talk to aware of is the progress that's being made of bringing lean manufacturing processes into construction, or lean practices. And they have a lot to offer for this. We've done 2 different studies now that have real data to support the beneficial impact on project outcomes for everybody. And while, of course, there are some structured processes, what they're mostly there for is to encourage better behavior and a way more positive attitude among the people who are going to be working together. Look, technical skills, especially around technology skills, are always going to be important. But you may have seen this just like we do. Sometimes the technology that's meant to, quote unquote, connect people end up creating barriers between human beings. They really reduce the amount of actual human communication, which is so important to understanding the nuance of anything. And this aspect I talked about industrialization, sometimes people think, oh, well, just robots are going to do everything. That's not what this is about. This really, it doesn't reduce the role of experience and wisdom and judgment. It actually enhances it in design. It's a very good thing to let computers do some of the dumb grunt stuff so that designers can apply their judgment to make better decisions. Look at how all of us do travel now, right? You can basically get any one of these dozen travel sites. They go out and do all the grinding work. You tell them what you want to do. They go out and grab all the information, curate it for you, put it in a way that you can now make a decision. And you make a much more intelligent decision much faster. Right? And for construction, yes, the degree of automation that's going to be coming in that can be driven by computers to work perfectly with whatever the model is asking those machines to do. What that's going to mean is it's going to be safer for workers, and it's going to allow much longer careers. I got 2 friends who are in masonry, and they both had to retire in their 40s because their knees and their backs went out, versus now being able to use machines to do that. And they can concentrate on striking joints and really doing artful and beautiful masonry, and letting machines do some of the grunting stuff.
One of the guests I had, his podcast hasn't yet played, but he was talking about how when the typewriter was replaced by the computer, everyone was very fearful that there would be no jobs. And in fact, there's like 10 times to 100 times more jobs now because of the computers. And I think it's the same thing's going to happen. We're not going to lose jobs. We're going to have different jobs and be able to build more things.
And I think if there's a kind of a human element to focus on, it's probably this idea of emotional intelligence. I think that is currently underappreciated in our industry, which tends to have a lot of tough guys walking around, but it needs to be better understood as it applies to design and construction. There's a lot of people now who are trying to develop approaches for this that are specific to construction. And frankly, I also think that having more women in construction will tend to help that. I don't know that testosterone is the greatest drug to help people be more open to ideas. So I just think all of these things are going to help support the idea. It may need a different name to be successful in construction, but I think the principles apply so well.
I know the work that I've been working on for, dozens and dozens of years is about creating new norms for integration and collaboration. So that is really the culture. Norms The values create the norms, which create the culture, so that the culture is less adversarial. In fact, it's not adversarial, because if you have the adversarial protectionism culture, trust cannot emerge. And without trust, you don't have conversation, you don't have issue resolution, you don't have decisions. So working towards creating that culture is so important. And of course, you have to have people that have emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence can be learned. Some people may not have it, but it is a skill people can acquire, been my experience. So I think these things will be important, and they'll be different as this new industrialized way of doing business emerges, it seems like, because you're still going to have people involved, but the norms will change.
Absolutely. So a lot of judgment involved and the potential for different opinions and perspectives, but it doesn't have to be about somebody being right.
Of all these trends you see in the industry, what do you feel is the defining trend that will really impact how teams work together over the next decade?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's going to get down to how teams take advantage of all these amazing resources we've been talking about to actually focus on how are we as a group going to better deal with the unavoidable and inherent risk and uncertainty of design and construction. I think you're going to hopefully see a continuing evolution away from the typical risk strategy of avoid and transfer, followed quickly by filing claims and suing to recover, to an approach of understand, embrace, and manage risk and uncertainty. We are doing a fair amount of work in this area with a bunch of different clients right now. And I'm convinced that we are able to either have or are able to collect enough data, and there's enough software now that we can start to be really good at predictive analytics, right? If you can collect enough, you have enough safety data, now you can combine it with all sorts of the other factors on a project and begin to look at what of all these conditions are really the ones that create the most safe jobs or the least safe jobs where incidents occur. And can we start to get ahead of that now as a team? There's enough analytical software and certainly enough advancement and continuing advancement around collaborative practices here to optimize both the design and the constructability, right? Those are classically at odds with each other. We've got enough integration happening between technology solutions that I think we're going to be able to support increasingly robust integrated digital workflows between all the various parties that take advantage of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then it can also easily get input from that experienced smart person at the moment that you need them to have input, and you frame a decision for them specifically so that they can use their expertise and add it to the process at the right moment. So it's optimizing this whole project delivery process and making a team actually a team rather than really just hired mercenaries that are there to protect their own contracts. And really lean processes, I mentioned again, have been adapted very well for design and construction. And they're definitely focused on de-risking project delivery. An important basic tenet of lean is to articulate what the project goals are, right? And that gives us now a shared culture that we can focus on. It's not about you. It's not about me. What's best for the project, right? And if you actually make that a structured part of what you're all doing together, that can really be helpful. Make sure that that's always the main driver for decision making, and not, frankly, kind of some of the petty stuff that tends to get in the way.
Can you give any examples of sort of how this process might play out?
Oh, yeah, sure. We've done 3 now in a row and are probably going to do another one next year. Study on what the best practices are for managing risk. What are contractors doing that really helps? And the one that was a real low scorer the first time came up a little bit last time and was number 1 this time in terms of trying to identify risk in advance was a specific, focused meeting with all the key players to kick off a project that's just about risk. You've all gone through these drawings. You know this project inside and out that way. You've built these kinds of projects before. That's why you got hired. This is not your first rodeo. You, electrical contractor, you, structural contractor, come to the meeting with the 5 things you're most worried about that are going to create risk from your perspective on this project. And you're going to be heard. Every single person is going to be heard. Sure, there's going to be commonality. That means those are the ones we got to really focus on. And then there'll be ones that are unique for you that everybody else needs to get and own part of and understand and feel that for you. And then we're going to commit to taking care of that with each other. And then we're not going to put that in a binder on a shelf, because what also came out in that study as the number one most effective tool for mitigating risk once the project's flying is to keep revisiting that on a regular basis. How are we doing against that? Anything new come up? Are we taking care of you on that? Are you satisfied on that? Are you de-risked on that? Those are not, your standard risk registers and standard rules and, great big hammers to hit people in the head with. This is real human interaction and taking advantage of collective knowledge. Together, we all know more than any one of us knows. We did a really interesting study for the Lean Construction Institute. We went out to 81 major owners. I mean, this is not Joe Bob putting up a tilt-up warehouse somewhere in Waco. These are your biggest healthcare systems, your biggest corporations, your biggest government agencies, people doing serious work. And we asked them to look back over the last 5 years, think about your very best project, the real rock star in your portfolio, and then think about one that you would say is completely typical, average, run-of-the-mill, right at the 50% mark. And then we asked them a whole bunch of different questions about how do they contract for those, how do they organize their teams for those, and how do they operate their teams for those. Because what we wanted to try and find out is those things which nobody has enough data to figure out. If owners had the secret sauce of why that one project was great, they'd make every project great, but they don't, right? So we spread this over 81 owners to try and find out what are the common threads that correlate to the best projects. And then also what are the ones that are the poor performing ones. Things that came out of that, the perception among the team of the quality of that team chemistry, you saw that that was high on 72% of the best projects and only 9% of the typical projects. Were the team members committed to the same project goals? You saw that on 83% of the best projects, only 16% of the typical. Was there integration between the team members, right? Did they have each other's backs essentially and were sharing information in a structured way? 59%, yes, on the best projects, 9% on the typical projects. How about the timeliness of decision making? You got 34% said there was really good timely decision making on those best projects, only 9%. These are the kinds of things that you can actually be very specific about implementing. And at the company level, you want to make sure you don't hire anybody onto your team that A, is not willing to collaborate, and B, can't keep up technologically, because really there just isn't any excuse for either of those.
You're making my heart feel very good right now, because what you're describing is exactly what structured collaborative partnering does for a project. So you're making me feel very good. So what advice can you offer a team to use these trends to help them to be more effective?
I'd say that trying to get more familiar with the principles of lean construction, seeing how they can apply, doing something like that risk meeting, where unless you ask a question of everyone around the table about what their particular concerns are, everybody's just assuming that everybody else around the table has the same concerns they do. And it's amazing the diversity that you have, right? Just like in any kind of diversity training, you really have to be able to understand what it's like to be in the shoes of someone else. And also knowing really clearly from owners, what does a win look like for you? What does success look like for you? Don't just assume that, well, if it comes in on time and on budget, they're happy. It doesn't work that simply. right? We did a very interesting study where we asked owners separately from their delivery teams, both architects and contractors. We asked owners, how frequently are you satisfied with the performance of your teams? And we did it in 4 different categories. And then we asked the other side, the architects and the contractors, how frequently will your clients tell us that they're satisfied? It was night and day. The delivery teams thought they were knocking it out of the park. And it was usually about a 3x factor between percentages that said that they were satisfied and of the owners, and the percentages that said that they thought they were delivering satisfaction. And, you don't do that to say, oh, you're wrong and you're right. That points to the fact that nobody is defining what satisfaction for that owner is going to be. Nobody asked the question, right? And I think back to my own career, and that change I went through after going through B school is I would start asking questions like that of owners. Let's make sure we understand what success is going to look like for you. I don't want to walk in and assume that my success, which is doing a beautiful building and having something great in my portfolio, is your success, right? There may be some overlap there. Terrific. Let's make sure we achieve that. But we need to know what success is for you, because that's nuanced. And that's what makes them use somebody else next time, because you didn't magically read their mind.
It also seems as though it really depicts the separation, the lack of integration, that you're not communicating enough to know what you're really heading to do. What I've seen on really large projects as they get more complex, the more you have these bifurcated teams that are, 2, 3, 4, 100 different teams, everyone working on their own thing, just adds to the complexity and the risk of that project is never going to be successful. And yeah, you're right, exactly right. The owner is the one that has to decide what the vision is for what is success. And on a lot of the projects I work on now, on time, on budget is a given. We want to know what's going to be extraordinary. What is this team going to do that's exceptional that we're going to do to create, because this team came together, somehow this project created something exceptional and not just your run-of-the-mill project. But there's an awful lot of projects that they'd be just really happy if they could be on time and on budget out there, which doesn't make it fun, but that's just reality. So what do you think a leader, someone who is an owner that's a leader, and maybe a design leader and a contracting leader, what could they do today to be ready for these trends that are coming?
I think it's clear that people have got to be ready to keep investing in technology. That's just the cost of doing business. Does anybody bother to calculate the ROI for laptops anymore, or smartphones, or their internet connections? No. A lot of the rest of these things coming around, the laser scanning, the modeling technology, look, this is just the way business is going to be done. You simply have to embrace that and get over the fact that you're looking for ROI all the time. But more important, I think, to the themes of some of the things we've been talking about is actively and consciously and intentionally investing in your people. There is a war for talent going on. We have done 4 different studies on this in the last 2 years. It's getting worse, right? Hiring, we know, is hard. Guess what else is the metric right now, which is really under attack? Retention. Because if you can't hire off the street, guess where you go? You poach. And retention is now becoming this thing which has really spiked up in all aspects of the industry. So important to hire very well, but you got to invest to keep people. And a lot of that's going to be training them. And frankly, back to the technology thing, I think go ahead and make technology competency a part of someone's formal job evaluation, right? Let them know coming in that they're going to be held accountable for their ability to function in that digitally savvy universe. And from the leadership culture viewpoint that you were talking about, I think it's important for an organization to learn to fail successfully. What do I mean by that? Create an environment where it's okay to take reasonable, educated risks and fail. There's a lean principle that's core to working lean, which is plan, do, check, adjust, right? You make your best shot at what might work, you do it, you immediately find out if it did work or didn't, and you adjust and you move forward. there's a theologian, Cardinal John Newman. He said this very well. He said, nothing would be done at all if one waited until one could do it so well that no one could find fault with it. You just got to go ugly early and get engaged and try things, and especially let your younger people try things. And also, from a leadership viewpoint, whether you're an owner or whether you're running one of these firms, is mission. Mission turns out to be the best motivator, especially for younger people. Why is your organization unique in that way? It's like what you were talking about with a project team. What are we going to do that's special that we're all going to really feel connected to and important about? And then it's one thing to talk it. You got to walk the talk, right? The leaders have got to actually show that this is a priority for them. I mean, everybody's on time and on budget, like you said, right? But how are you making the world a better place? And how are your employees contributing and appreciating that to get that deeper level of engagement? A friend of mine was telling me about a project that he was involved with. It was this cancer research facility. You know what they did when they kicked off the project and they had all the key people around the table? They brought in a cancer researcher who was going to be working in it. And that person looked at everybody at the table and they said, 1 out of 3 of you or your loved ones are going to develop cancer during your lifetime. You are creating something that's going to help either save or maybe even prevent that for you or your loved ones. Do you think anybody's going to be out there looking for how to cut corners on that during the course of that construction? No way. They know now they're building something that really matters. They're actually truly engaged as human beings in this important and amazing process that we do of creating these capital assets.
I remember some years ago working on the Pasadena City Hall project. The City Hall was built, in the late 1800s by a renowned architect that also built the state capitol here in California and the City Hall in San Francisco. And I had the historian come in to the partnering session. And she shared all about the history of why the founding fathers had built these 5 buildings and how they were going to create this place to come in the West Coast. So they could attract people from the East Coast to come to the West Coast. And they even where they put them so it was a place of power, a place of presence. And she also brought the plans, the original plans and specs, 50 pages. That's all there were, 50 pages. But she shared with the team and all the trades and everyone, it made that building real, and that they were working on a building that had historical significance, and was not only beautiful. And people do things because there's a reason behind it. So shifting over a little bit back to you, I know you've faced challenges in your career. So take us back to a moment where one of your biggest challenges.
That's probably the moment that I joined Burt Hill, which is that big AE firm. They had 6 offices. They were headquartered out in Western Pennsylvania, and the Philadelphia office that I was hired into was just a project office for some big mega projects that they were doing in Philadelphia. But now those projects were done. They only had about 10 people there. They were losing money. The people who were there just weren't able to leverage those big projects and get to where they could stand on their own. So I was recruited by the board to come in, make this a viable, profitable office, because Philadelphia is a big and good market. Really make it stand on its own and contribute. And I was hired by the board out in Western Pennsylvania. They had 3 associates there who were running the office jointly at the time, and they didn't know that I'd been hired until the day I walked in the door. I found out later that each of them had been lobbying independently to get the job themselves. So that was a really hostile environment for me. I mean, none of them wanted me to succeed, because if I failed, then they'd get their shot again. So I knew immediately I was either going to have to make it work with these folks, or eventually I'd have to get rid of them. That's what they call it, Wharton driving out the ambivalence, right? So I committed to making it work. We got some help. A consultant from Weld Cox's office came in and did some team building type of stuff with us. But what I basically had to do is look each one of those three in the eye and say, look, I don't do what you do. I have a lot of respect for what you've done here. And I am not here to tell you what to do. You have these great projects. You've got great capabilities. You've brought in some really good people. Frankly, we're the best kept secret in Philadelphia. And my job is to make all of you guys really successful. And I committed to that, and it worked. We grew that office within, I think, 3 years. We were up to 60 people. We had awesome new projects, and we were a legit local player in the Philadelphia market. And I think has to be some contribution to what made Bird Hill attractive as a merger partner ultimately for Stantec, because Stantec came in and merged with them in order to get a bigger U.S. presence. And I think that certainly contributed to that to some degree. But that was a tough day one.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough day one. And maybe day two too. What's the very best advice you've ever received?
My first job in an architectural firm, I was this kid, and I was working in a firm. It's called H2L2 in Philadelphia. Working on a project. I hit a situation where there was some conflict. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember I definitely wasn't sure how to handle it. And so I asked the project manager on the job. And she was what I thought at the time, from my perspective in my 20s, some grizzled old veteran. She might have been all of 50 or something, But anyway, she said to me, just call the client and talk to him about it. And I went, well, wait a minute. Aren't we supposed to be, the ones who know all the answers? And aren't they looking to us to figure that out? She looked at me and she said the most important words that I have heard, and I still remember them to this day. She goes, this is a people business. Pick up the phone. And I did. And within 10 minutes, it was all worked out. The client was really happy I called, loves to be engaged in these things. It was just the best experience I could have had. And I wasn't going to go there. And she said those words, this is a people business, And it really, really is. And I always try and remember that every day I'm in it.
I hail that. I believe that completely too. And I know you have a resource for us, a gift for Construction Nation. So you want to tell us about that?
Oh, I do. Yeah. We did this study that I've referenced a couple of times, looking into how do we go about managing the inherent uncertainty. You're not going to get around it, but let's acknowledge it. Let's be intelligent about it. Let's admit that it's there as a group, right? Let's admit that even though we're the most optimistic species on the planet, and we always think that even though every other project went in the ditch, that this one's going to be the perfect one. No, it's not. Okay. Can we have that adult conversation in advance, right? Can we acknowledge that it's likely that there's things that are going to happen? One of the things we're doing is planning to build a database of the things which do go wrong, which were unplanned on projects, so that if you're planning to build a new 12-story patient tower, you can go and actually see what happened on 20 other ones in the last 2 years. Just be more warned with the kinds of things that, well, no, you don't want to talk about them now because, people might get mad. Oh, man, they happen, right? Let's plan for them. But coming out of that first report, we presented it to lots of different groups all over the place. It was jointly funded by the AIA, the AGC, the Design Build Institute, the Lean Construction Institute, and we even had collaboration between Autodesk and Graphisoft on it. People said, is there something we can do that's tangible that we can take this to owners? And so we developed the Owners Planning Guide. It's a project planning guide for owners and their teams. And largely the idea is plop this down in front of an owner, and it's hopefully going to help them be a better owner for you. It's going to help them be more collaborative. It's going to help raise the questions about what is it your goals really are. Can we understand what these are the things which research says make better projects happen? Can we do some of those? Can we talk about some of these in advance? Can we be better prepared? And we actually have a link in it to an online contingency calculator. Because one of the things we found was that about 20% of owners have any real way of calculating a contingency on a project. They just go, hey, Eddie, what did we use last time? It's crazy. So it should be very tailored to the specific nature of this project you're about to do, right? And so we have a structured way of going through and assigning some priorities to some of the elements and some likelihoods of them happening. And it'll generate a contingency that, of course, dials down over the course. But if nothing else, it gives you a structured way to have an adult conversation with an owner and the key people in a project team to say, can we be realistic that what are we going to do when there's problems in the drawings? Guess what? There's going to be problems in the drawings. What are we going to do, right, when there's coordination issues? What are we going to do when there's construction errors? What are we going to do when these things happen that nobody wants to talk about? But we know they're going to happen because there's proof of it, okay? And so we boiled it down into this guide, which, you can distribute to folks, please. We want people using it as much as possible. It's really just meant to help create more of a team early on and give people a structured way to be realistic about the things that you really are going to face on doing one of these crazy capital projects that we all do.
And we'll have a link, and we'll have a PDF of this in the show notes. So you can just go to constructiondreamteam.com and look for episode number 11, and it will be there for you. So how can people contact you? What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I'm all about LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. A lot of people reach out to me, ask me things, what do you know about this? What do you know about that? Do you know anybody I can talk to about this? I love to connect people with each other who can help each other. And I have this very unique and lovely position of being able to sort of watch the whole industry and try and help it improve. I've been in the trenches. I get that it's difficult to see above the waterline sometimes, and anything I can do to help anybody be more effective at what they do, I'm all about doing that. So, find me on LinkedIn. I'm right there.
And what might be your parting advice to the Construction Nation?
I will quote my boss, the guy who hired me at McGraw Hill, now Dodge, Norbert Young, who had asked me to come in and help, change the company towards this new direction of connecting people. And there was lots of ways to do it and lots of crazy things to try. And of course I was concerned that it might not work or whatever. And he just kept saying, remember, the ideal is the enemy of the good, right? Just keep trying things, right? It's okay if it doesn't work out perfectly, right? If it's better than yesterday, it's a good thing to do. Make it better again the next day. Just keep moving. Relentlessly keep moving forward and try to make things better every time you do something. And an awful lot of it's going to depend on you and the other people, eyeball to eyeball contact you have with this group of people brought together to do these projects. That's where the magic is.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Steve, for coming and sharing. And I think this will be a wonderful episode for people. They're going to have a lot of food for thought, that is for sure. And you'll probably be getting some contacts. So I appreciate it so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming.
Good. And anybody who wants any of the reports, they're also up on construction.com. You can just search for Smart Market Reports, and there's dozens of them that can be resources for all sorts of things.
Construction Nation, dream teams don't just happen. They're built one step at a time. Why not send out this episode to your entire team so they can help you? The more people you have helping, the faster you can build your construction dream team. You can't have your dream until you build your team. Please head on over to constructiondreamteam.com to sign up for our newsletter. And don't forget to sign up and subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. We have a photo contest going on. Take a picture of your team with the Construction Dream Team poster, and you will be entered into a contest where your team could win a free lunch. So take a photo and send it to me, Sue at constructiondreamteam.com. Remember, Construction Dream Team drops every Monday at 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert so you can learn how to create your construction dream team. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Construction Nation, for joining me, and I will catch you next time.